Beryl, a middle-aged swordsman, operates a dojo in a remote location, living a quiet and peaceful existence. During one of his training sessions, his father approaches him and mentions how much he'd love to have grandchildren to care for. Even though 20 years have passed since Beryl took over the role of instructor at the dojo, he remains just as sigil as he was in the past. Beryl explains that his focus has always been on managing the family dojo, leaving him no time to consider starting a family. This dojo has been passed down through Beryl's family for generations, and ever since he inherited it from his father, he has devoted himself to the role of instructor. There was a time when he aspired to accomplish great things, like earning the title of a renowned sword master. But while his skills certainly surpass those of the average swordsman, he doesn't believe they're enough to merit that prestigious title. That being said, he considers himself a capable teacher, as many of his students have gone on to become accomplished swordsmen after graduating. After wrapping up practice for the day, Beryl heads home to share a meal with his parents. His father, however, continues to push the idea that he should settle down and marry soon. Hoping to strengthen his argument, Beryl's dad turns to his wife, Friend, urging her to convince their son to find a wife. But his mother simply replies that these matters can't be forced. There's no reason to pressure him. That said, she still makes it clear that she's looking forward to holding a grandchild someday. Beryl nearly chokes on his food at the remark, knowing full well how complicated that would be, especially when he doesn't even have a girlfriend to begin with. Just a few moments later, there's a knock at the door, and when Beryl answers, he's met with the sight of a beautiful young woman. She greets him by calling him her master, and after taking a closer look at her, Beryl recognizes her as Alusha Citrus, one of his students. Welcoming her inside, he prepares a cup of tea so the two can catch up. Beryl recalls Alusha being exceptionally talented during her training days, but even he couldn't have predicted she'd rise to become the commander of the Royal Knight Order. Curious, Beryl asks Alusha what brought her here. She explains that, as the Knight Commander, one of her responsibilities is overseeing the training of new recruits, and she took the initiative to recommend Beryl as a special sword instructor. In fact, she secured official approval as an imperial decree, which is why she came to personally deliver the news. Beryl never sought out such a position, and the thought of refusing crosses his mind until his father interjects, warning him that defying an imperial order isn't just a simple refusal, it's treason punishable by execution. Ignoring it isn't an option. Alusha reassures Beryl that refusing the offer won't get him killed, but he'd likely face some serious consequences if he declines, so it's probably best if he just goes along with it. She already has a carriage waiting to take them to the capital, ready to leave immediately, and she'll explain the details of his new position tomorrow. Beryl can't believe Alusha actually expects him to leave on the spot, but his father is already fully supportive of the idea. He wishes Beryl good luck and tells him to make sure he finds a wife while he's in the capital. In fact, he mentions that Alusha would be a perfect wife for Beryl, but Beryl tells him to cut it out because it's making Alusha feel awkward. The age difference between him and Alusha is far too big for them to be a couple, but Alusha quietly mutters under her breath that she wouldn't actually mind. Regardless, Beryl has no desire to find out what the harsh consequences might be, so he agrees to the proposal and decides to go with Alusha to the capital. As they sit together in the carriage, Beryl observes that Alusha is still wielding the sword he once gave her. This particular blade is one that Beryl presents to every student who graduates from his dojo, and ever since receiving it, Alusha has treated hers with exceptional care. It brings Beryl joy to see how deeply she cherishes his gift, yet he can't help but feel that such a sword isn't truly fitting for someone of her rank as a knight commander. He mentions she could easily get a finer blade from any blacksmith, but Alusha insists this sword is the ideal one for her. Beryl guesses she must be so devoted to it because, as her old teacher, she still thinks anything from him is of higher quality. But he's just a regular swordsman, hardly someone who could measure up as an extraordinary instructor. Just then, Alusha says she's thrilled that the Backwater sword master is at last heading to the capital. Beryl is completely confused about who she means, since he's definitely not a sword master, but she explains that he's actually quite famous in the swordsmanship world. He has taught dozens of students who later became legendary adventurers and swordsmen, making him something of a living legend, though he's not too fond of the nickname he's been given. Beryl thinks the story is interesting, but he's pretty sure that Alusha is the only person who actually sees him as a sword master. Before long, they reach the royal capital, and Alusha leaves Beryl at an inn so he can get some rest, telling him that she'll come by to pick him up the next morning. The following day, Alusha escorts Beryl to the castle and presents him to the Knight's Order. She tells the recruits that Beryl is so powerful that even she wouldn't stand a chance against him, emphasizing how privileged they should feel to have someone of his caliber as their instructor. However, not all the knights are convinced he merits such a prestigious role, and one among them is especially displeased by the situation. Not long after, Beryl and Alusha are chatting in the hallway, and she offers her congratulations on his new role as a special instructor. She explains that he'll only need to visit the castle 3 or 4 times a month to train the recruits, meaning it shouldn't disrupt his regular teaching schedule at the dojo too much. Just then, a girl runs up to Beryl, practically bursting with excitement at seeing her master again. Her name is Kiruni, and she used to be one of the students at Beryl's dojo 2 years back. He remembers that her goal was to become part of the Knight's Order, so he's happy to see that she's actually managed to get there. Although Kiruni is still just a trainee for now, meaning she still has quite a bit of work ahead before she can officially become a full-fledged knight. With that said, she is happy that she'll get to train under Beryl again, and the same goes for Alusha. That evening, Beryl arrives back at his house, but as soon as he steps inside, he discovers yet another former student waiting for him. It's Randrid, who has dropped by to introduce Beryl to his wife and their newborn baby. Though pleased to see Randrid thriving, Beryl's mood is quickly soured when his father interrupts, scolding him for returning empty-handed and insisting he shouldn't bother coming home until he has a family of his own, just like Randrid here. Now, about Randrid, after finishing his training at Beryl's dojo, he rose through the ranks to become a platinum-level adventurer, but now that he's a father, he's decided to retire and settle back in the village. Reaching platinum rank is no small feat, so Beryl is taken aback that Randrid would walk away from it without hesitation. Then again, adventuring is risky business, and with a child to look after, it makes sense he wouldn't want to gamble with his life anymore. While he's here, Randrid promises to do his best to run the dojo, but Beryl has no idea what he's talking about. Beryl's father tells him that since Randrid is decently skilled, he can take over as the dojo's instructor, and that means Beryl won't have to stay here anymore. So his father is kicking him out, even though Beryl owns this house. The following day, Beryl tells Alusha everything about the situation and mentions that he needs to find a place to live in the city. The inn he stayed at the night before was a bit too fancy for him to live there long term, so he's looking for something cheaper, and Alusha is more than willing to help him search. She offers to let him live at her house, but Beryl feels that wouldn't be appropriate, so much to Alusha's disappointment. He politely declines. Then, Alusha suggests they grab a bite to eat since it's lunchtime, and Beryl agrees, so the two of them head off toward a restaurant. As they continue walking, someone suddenly shouts at Alusha, accusing her of being shameless for strolling through town with a man and referring to him as her master. It's clear this girl and Alusha share some past hostility, as she finds it disgraceful that a respected knight commander would openly accompany some unknown man. Beryl, trying to stay out of trouble, had been keeping his face hidden, but the girl yanks down his mask to get a look at him. The moment she recognizes him, she gasps and also calls him master. Now completely baffled, Beryl stares at her confused, as he has no clue who she is. Frustrated, she reminds him that her name is Shurna and that he once rescued her and even trained her in swordsmanship. It takes Beryl some time to remember, but in the end, he recalls discovering an injured girl 20 years ago. He brought her in, helped her recover, and later trained her in combat. However, it had been more than 10 years since he last saw her, so he's genuinely pleased to learn she's now a black rank adventurer. Shurna expresses regret for not visiting Beryl in all this time, though she's also interested in understanding why he's unexpectedly in the royal capital now. Alusha clarifies that Beryl has been named a special instructor for the Knight's Order, which is why he's relocating to the capital, and she's assisting him in finding a proper inn. However, Shurna insists she'd be far better at securing accommodations since, as an adventurer, she usually stays in inns. Soon, Shurna and Alusha begin bickering over who gets to accompany Beryl on his search for a place to stay, leaving Beryl confused as to why the two dislike each other so intensely. Despite their constant squabbling, with their assistance, he finally locates an inn that meets his needs. Grateful, he thanks them both for their help, but pleads with them to stop arguing on his behalf. He simply can't take any more shouting. Out of respect for Beryl, the two two reluctantly fall silent and walk home together without another word. Beryl watches them from a window, and while he can't say he will enjoy all the excitement of city life, he thinks it's nice that he will have so many of his students around to take care of him. The following day, training is underway as usual at the Knight's order, and the Vice Commander Henblitz is completely overwhelming everyone with his skill. Having just defeated his sparring partner with ease, suddenly, Alusha steps forward and makes an announcement, letting everyone know that there's been a change in the schedule. Rather than once a week, Beryl will begin instructing them starting today, and she expects them to put in more effort than ever before. Beryl tells them all that he's happy to be here, but before he can begin his first lesson, Henblitz approaches and says he has something to say. To be a special instructor for the Liberian Order, Beryl would need to possess a certain level of strength, so he is challenging him to a duel. Henblitz isn't trying to be disrespectful, he simply wants to make sure that Beryl is good enough for the position, and as the Vice Commander, he is within his rights to ask for a duel, so Alusha authorize it. Beryl truly wishes she wouldn't keep making decisions for him, but now that Henblitz has issued the challenge, he has no option but to prepare for the duel. Henblitz is convinced that Alusha only holds Beryl in high regard because he trained her as a child, but that doesn't mean Beryl is actually qualified to be a special instructor for the Knight Order, and Henblitz intends to prove that by defeating him here and now. Beryl actually agrees with Henblitz. He doesn't believe he's suited for the role either. However, if the man Alusha personally recommended were to lose without a fight, it would reflect poorly on her, so, despite his doubts, Beryl decides to give it his all against Henblitz. The duel begins, and Henblitz immediately rushes forward to assault Beryl. As he blocks the incoming blows, Beryl is stunned by the raw strength and blistering speed of his opponent, yet he remains focused. If he can just redirect one of Henblitz's attacks with perfect timing, it will create an opening, giving Beryl the chance to move in and land a hit. That's exactly what Beryl does, and Henblitz is left completely stunned, because in an actual battle, that strike would have easily killed him. That gives Beryl the point, so they both return to their original positions, and Henblitz launches another round of attacks. Beryl is still amazed by Henblitz's sheer strength, but he finds that every move is fairly predictable, making it easy for him to parry. Realizing he won't be able to land a hit unless he goes all out, Henblitz decides to unleash his signature move. The Roaring Blade technique carries such immense power that blocking or parrying it is impossible, meaning there's no way Beryl should come out on top here. Yet, the moment Henblitz swings his sword, Beryl vanishes, only to reappear behind him, his own blade now resting right at Henblitz's shoulder. With that, Beryl officially wins the duel, and Henblitz doesn't even feel upset about the outcome. Instead, he's simply in awe of the incredible skill Beryl just demonstrated, and he offers an apology for the rude way he acted earlier. Sometime after, Henblitz throws a party to officially welcome Beryl as the new instructor, though he's still dying to figure out how Beryl countered his signature spin move. Beryl reveals that he simply matched Henblitz's rotation, allowing him to slip behind him effortlessly, though pulling it off was far more difficult than Beryl's casual explanation seems. Regardless, Henblitz can't wait to train under Beryl's guidance, and the rest of the group feels the same way. It's been a few days since Beryl took on the role of instructor here, and while two of the knights are training together, he approaches them to offer a bit of guidance. He's been observing their fighting style, and although their swordplay is pretty solid, he feels they still need to improve their sense of distance. He then shows them how, by paying too much attention to your opponent's sword, you can end up letting them close the gap without even realizing it. It might not look like a big deal, but in an actual sword fight, even half a step of distance can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Beryl believed he was just offering some basic advice to his students, and with the way everyone is staring at him, he starts to wonder if he said something foolish. However, ever since his duel with Henblitz, the knights have been taking every word Beryl says with complete seriousness, and he has to admit, it's definitely made his job a whole lot easier. Once the day's training comes to an end, Beryl takes a seat to rest, and Henblitz passes him a towel to wipe away his sweat. A short while later, Kearney walks up to Beryl and inquires whether he has anything planned for later. Since Beryl didn't have anything particular in mind, Kearney suggests giving him a tour of the town. Reflecting on it, Beryl realizes he hasn't really explored much of Baltrain yet, so he agrees to her proposal. Delighted, Kearney quickly dashes off to change her outfit. At the same time, Alusha is occupied with a meeting among the royal officials, delivering a report on the current condition of the Knight's Order, particularly regarding the newly appointed special instructor. She reassures them that Beryl has surpassed every expectation, and with no further matters to address, the discussion concludes. Many had cautioned her that pursuing the role of Knight Captain would hinder her swordsmanship progress due to the endless administrative duties. However, the sole reason she accepted the position was to secure enough authority to bring Beryl to the capital. Back when Alucia was just a child, her parents took her to Beryl's dojo so she could learn how to protect herself, and from the very first moment she met him, she could tell Beryl was a kind person. Once she became part of the dojo, Beryl had her work on her sword swings and leap across tree stumps to improve her mobility. He also put her through some basic strength training, and although his methods may have seemed a bit unconventional, it wasn't long before Alucia started to feel completely at ease with a sword in her hands. One afternoon, Beryl approached Alucia and asked if she'd be interested in a sparring match. Eager to demonstrate all she had mastered, she happily accepted. Yet, the moment they crossed blades, she found no weaknesses in his posture, no gaps to exploit. Having trained under Beryl since childhood, Alucia had assumed all sword instructors were on his level, but that belief shattered when Beryl arranged a practice duel against another dojo. Only then did she understand how mistaken she had been. The opponent she faced was full of openings and had the patience of a kid, recklessly charging at Alucia without any real strategy. As expected, Alucia completely overwhelmed him. It was hardly even a challenge. After the training session wrapped up, Beryl and his students began the walk back to their dojo, and Beryl felt pleased that his students had the opportunity to go up against fighters with different styles. Speaking of that, Alucia asks Beryl if his dojo is actually better than most others, but he doesn't really like thinking about it in those terms. Sure, they may have come out on top in today's mock battle, but what matters more is what you take away from the experience, not whether you win or lose. Alucia gets the message Beryl is trying to convey, but then she suddenly notices her hairpin is missing. She realizes she must have dropped it back at the other dojo, and since it means a lot to her, she tells Beryl she's heading back to retrieve it. After returning to the rival dojo, Alucia begins searching for the hairpin she had lost. To her dismay, it seems the guy she defeated had already picked it up. For a brief moment, it almost appeared he might do the reasonable thing and simply return it without any fuss, but that would have been too straightforward. Instead, he throws the hairpin deeper into the dojo and taunts her, declaring that if she wants it back, she'll have to fight every single one of them at the same time. He may have lost to her in their sparring match, but now, with all his comrades behind him, he's convinced there's no way she can win. Given how sloppy their swordsmanship was earlier, Alucia actually stands a decent chance of taking them all, but she remembers Beryl's teachings. He wouldn't approve of her using her skills just to beat people up, so she's completely prepared to take a beating. Just before the boy could hit her in the face, Beryl steps in front of Alucia and takes the blow himself. While the strike doesn't cause him any real damage, it still stings a bit, so he turns to the boys and asks if this is truly how they intend to use their sword skills. The guy, still oblivious to how wrong his actions are, goes for a blow to Beryl's head this time, but Beryl effortlessly ducks and disarms him in a single smooth motion. After that, he swiftly parries attacks from several of the jerk's friends. But before things escalate any further, the dojo master arrives on the scene. He heard the commotion and rushed over as quickly as possible, but he's clearly disappointed to find his students acting in such an undisciplined way. Kneeling down, he offers Beryl a heartfelt apology and assures him that he'll make sure something like this never happens again. Beryl and Alucia start walking home together. He mentions that he had a strange feeling when she went to retrieve her hairpin, so he followed her just to make sure she was safe. Alucia feels guilty since Beryl ended up getting hit because of her, but he reassures her that the hit wasn't that serious and, more importantly, she didn't do anything wrong, so there's no reason for her to blame herself for what happened. If anything, he believes it's his own fault, because as her teacher, he should never have let her walk into a potentially dangerous situation alone. Time passes, and Alucia finds herself in the middle of yet another mock battle with Beryl. His technique remains as sharp as ever, but this time, as he swings his sword, Alucia manages to keep pace with him and even lands a point on Beryl for the first time. He's taken aback by just how much she's grown, but he feels that she's finally reached the point where she's ready to graduate from his dojo, so he hands her the ceremonial graduation sword. By now, Alucia Alicia had come to realize that Beryl was ignorant of how godly his sword skills are, and she really didn't want to leave his dojo because there was still so much she could learn from him. But at the same time, she didn't want to cause trouble for Beryl, so she didn't argue with him over it. Instead, she set out to prove that Beryl's techniques are superior to all others. So she enrolled in the Knight's Order program and took the entrance test. Just as she had anticipated, throughout the test, none of the other candidates could compare to the training Beryl had given her. Even the examiners struggled to match her pace, meaning they'd never stand a chance against Beryl himself. With reaction times and observational abilities that border on superhuman, far surpassing any ordinary person, Alicia has no doubt that Beryl is the world's greatest swordsman. Yet, Beryl remains unaware of his own skill, and knowing him, he'd be perfectly content to spend his life as an unrecognized sword master. But Alicia refused to let her master remain unrecognized. With her skills, she slowly rose through the ranks of the Knight's Order in hopes of gaining the power to support Beryl, and by the time she had finally acquired the position of Knight Commander, it had been 10 years since she left Beryl's dojo, and in that time, Beryl became even more amazing than she remembered him to be. She feels a little guilty about appointing him as an instructor without asking first, but it was the only way she could get him to leave the village and gain some recognition. She heads back to the training hall and runs into Henblitz, asking how the training session with Beryl went. Henblitz replies that it was incredible, and that they all gained a lot from him today. Not spotting Beryl anywhere, Alicia wonders if he already called it a day and went home. But Henblitz explains that he actually left with Kiruni, who mentioned wanting to give him a tour of the capital. Alicia gets a little jealous after hearing that because it means Kiruni basically asked Beryl out on a date, and she wishes she had thought of it first. Meanwhile, on Beryl and Kiruni's date, she's showing him all the wonderful shops they have in town, and Beryl is amazed by how lively this place is compared to his village. Although he wonders why Kiruni brought him to the Western District, since all the tourist attractions like the church and palace are meant to be in the Northern District. Kiruni agrees that he's right. But after living in the city for a while, you end up seeing the palace and the church so often that it starts to get a bit boring. However, Beryl was genuinely excited to finally see it. As they continue walking through the market, Beryl suddenly hears someone call his name. He turns around and sees a girl approaching him. She's calling him master, which means she must have been one of his students, but he doesn't recognize her at all. She also seems to be good friends with Kiruni, but he still can't remember who she is. The girl is disappointed that her master has forgotten about her, so she points to her sword to remind him that she was one of his graduates. Beryl thinks about it for a few more seconds, and he finally remembers where he has seen the girl before. Her name is Faisal, and she was indeed one of his students. For 2 years, she trained under Beryl alongside Kiruni, though her appearance back then was completely different. Since it's been 5 years since he last saw her, it's no surprise she's changed so much. She's practically grown into a whole new person, and it seems she's been thriving in the capital because she is now the star of the Magic Corps. Beryl is glad to hear she's doing well, though he's a little taken aback that she joined the Magic Corps. After all, he doesn't recall ever teaching her anything about magic. Kiruni asks Faisal if she's here to do some shopping, so she explains that she came to buy some magic accessories. Beryl has never heard of magic accessories before, so Faisal picks one up and explains that it allows anyone to use magic, although she is capable of using magic without any accessories. Beryl is surprised that Faisal can really use magic on her own, but then again she did say she's part of the Magic Corps, so it makes sense. Right then, Beryl hears a woman scream after her purse gets snatched. The moment he spots what's happening, Beryl prepares to chase after the thief, but before he can make a move, Faisal tells him to leave it to her. She unsheathes her sword and channels magic into it before swinging it in the thief's direction. The slash releases a wave of magical energy that wraps around the thief's legs, bringing him crashing to the ground, and as soon as he falls, Kiruni steps in to apprehend him. Beryl is impressed by how well the two of them handle the situation, especially Faisal's magic because he has never seen anything like it before. Faisal explains that she basically covers the sword in magic whenever she fights, and Beryl's training is really useful when it comes to adapting the magic for combat, so she is thankful, and Beryl is equally thankful that Faisal is still using all the techniques he taught her. The following morning, Beryl gets up early and heads out for a walk around the city. As he's strolling along, he suddenly hears someone call out his name. When he turns around, around, he sees a little girl standing there and asks if she's lost. The girl shouts at him, upset that he's treating her like a child, insisting that she's actually the head of the magic corps. But Beryl assumes she's just pretending and doesn't take her seriously. The girl grows increasingly frustrated that Beryl still doesn't believe her, so to prove herself, she conjures a massive fireball right from her fingertip. That finally convinces Beryl she really is with the magic corps, though he's shocked someone so small could wield such powerful magic. Annoyed, she snaps at him to stop calling her a little girl. Her name is Lucy. She's a full-grown adult, and she's actually older than Beryl himself. She won't tolerate being treated like a child any longer. Faisal had told her all about Beryl and how incredible he is, which made her want to meet him face to face. She's convinced that Beryl must be an outstanding teacher, especially since Faisal's swordsmanship is so impressive. But Beryl insists that Faisal's progress is all thanks to her own dedication. He merely taught her the fundamentals. Beryl had been walking alongside Lucy out of politeness, but she eventually brings him into a large open space, and it's pretty clear what's about to happen. Lucy takes great pride in her magic and trains daily to push her limits. The problem is, she doesn't have anyone strong enough to spar with, though now that she's with Beryl, a legendary sword master, she figures he'll make for a worthy opponent. Before Beryl even gets the chance to respond, Lucy fires off a blast of fire at him, but he quickly jumps back and dodges it just in time. Ideally, Beryl would have liked to avoid a fight completely, but judging by the intense look in Lucy's eyes, it's clear she won't back down until he gives her a real battle. So, he pulls out his sword and prepares himself to take her on. Beryl leaps to the side as Lucy hurls a massive fireball toward him, then swiftly dashes around to avoid her assault. Lucy keeps launching fireballs in his direction, but Beryl skillfully dodges and deflects every single one. Realizing her current approach isn't working, she changes tactics and summons 3 icy spheres using her ice magic. With a powerful throw, she sends the ice balls flying at Beryl, yet despite their large size, he effortlessly slices each one in half with just a single swing of his blade. Now that Lucy has seen Beryl's abilities, she's even more determined to keep fighting. However, Beryl wants to finish this quickly and starts rushing straight at her. Since he doesn't actually want to harm her, he plans to simply knock her out with the hilt of his sword. But right as he closes in, Lucy suddenly engulfs herself in flames, forcing Beryl to retreat. For a moment, she was genuinely concerned. She knows that if Beryl gets too close, she'd be taken down in an instant. Beryl is really beginning to wish he had the ability to use magic too, since going up against it with just a sword is proving to be incredibly difficult. But Lucy is only just getting warmed up. She conjures even more fireballs behind him, forcing Beryl to take off running once again. Lucy finds it entertaining to watch, seeing him dart around with no clear plan. But it's understandable. This is Beryl's first time fighting a wizard, so it's not like he has a strategy guide to follow. The fireballs eventually stop coming, and just as Beryl starts to believe he's in the clear, Lucy suddenly drops a giant ice ball right on top of him. Luckily, he notices it in time and manages to deflect it back toward her, but Lucy effortlessly shatters it using her fire magic. The aftermath leaves a thick layer of mist in the air, now blocking her line of sight. Beryl tries to seize the opportunity and launch an attack, but Lucy still has more tricks up her sleeve and blasts him back with a burst of lightning magic. So far, Beryl hasn't been able to land a clean hit on her. But at the same time, Lucy hasn't managed to strike him either, and it's beginning to wear on her nerves. She had hoped to wrap this up using just basic spells, but since Beryl has managed to endure for this long, she realizes it's time to pull out her ultimate move. Beryl catches sight of this and hesitates for a moment, thinking it might finally be his chance to strike. But just a second later, he stops cold as Lucy suddenly summons a black hole. He's not entirely sure what it's meant to do, but it's clear that charging in recklessly would be a terrible idea. So instead, he stays put and carefully waits for Lucy to make her next move. But then, to his surprise, Lucy suddenly releases her spell, letting the black hole vanish. She realizes there's no point in pushing further if Beryl can stay that calm even against something like that. Continuing the fight is pointless. With a sigh, she apologizes for going overboard and suggests they call it a day. Beryl, for his part, is just glad it's over, facing someone as unpredictable as Lucy had him on edge the whole time. Still, out of curiosity, Beryl wants to know what would have happened if Lucy had gone ahead and cast the spell. She tells tells him that, in theory, it would have torn his body to shreds. That said, she now understands why Faisal admires Beryl so much. Most people would have fainted in terror just from seeing that spell. And this is the first time she's ever encountered a swordsman like Beryl who could hold his own so well in a fight. That being said, she genuinely feels sorry for dragging him into a duel out of nowhere, so she tells him to stop by the magic institution later, and she'll personally make it up to him for all the trouble she caused. Later that same day, Beryl makes his way to the training hall as usual to teach the students. During his break, he happens to bump into Faisal in the hallway. She's there to drop off a batch of healing potions on behalf of the magic corps, and she offers him one for his own use, insisting he take it. He tries to refuse the offer since healing potions are usually pretty expensive, but Faisal insists. It's her way of apologizing for everything that happened with Lucy earlier that morning. Beryl had still been half sure that Lucy was actually just a little girl, but Faisal explains that Lucy uses magic to maintain a youthful appearance, meaning nobody really knows her true age. Still, Beryl can't help but marvel at how such immense power could be packed into such a small body. During their fight, he genuinely feared for his life. The whole ordeal leaves him swearing off battles with wizards entirely, but Faisal reassures him that Lucy is an exception. Most magic users can't sustain spells endlessly the way Lucy does. Against an average wizard, she insists Beryl would likely come out on top. Just then, Alusha shows up, and she tells Beryl that he has just received a special request. He is curious about it. So Alusha leads him to a room where they both meet with Shurna. She tells them that the Adventurers Guild would like to hire Beryl to organize some special training for the new adventurers in preparation for their first descent into a dungeon. The thought of new adventurers brings Beryl's mind back to his youth, when he himself dreamed of becoming an adventurer, since dungeon treasures can be quite valuable. Beryl was excited at the prospect of conquering one. However, after being badly beaten by monsters on his very first day, he fled home and never tried adventuring again. He explains to the two that, in his opinion, adventuring is a risky profession. Precisely for that reason, they want him to train the new adventurers. All the arrangements have already been made, and it won't disrupt his current role as a special instructor here. So really, there's nothing holding him back. Still, when it comes down to it, Beryl has to be the one to agree to take on the job. So Shurna invites him to come to the Adventurers Guild and meet with the Guild Master to talk about the job. The Adventurers Guild is nearby, so Shurna takes Beryl there immediately, and once they arrive, they enter the Guild Master's office. However, to Beryl's surprise, he sees Lucy sitting on the couch waiting. She had heard about the job offer he got from the Adventurers Guild, and since she's close friends with the Guild Master, she hurried over to see Beryl again. The Guild Master, Nidus, then steps forward and introduces himself. After everything Shurna and Lucy have told him about Beryl, he's absolutely certain that choosing him was the correct choice. Beryl attempts to interject, reminding Nidus that he hasn't actually agreed to the job yet, but his protest falls on deaf ears. Nidus points to his assistant Majin and tells Beryl that he can discuss the details of the job with him. But before any of that, Majin wants to clarify something. He asks Beryl if he has any prior experience as an adventurer, and Beryl answers no. Majin starts to doubt whether Beryl is truly fit to train the new adventurers. Beryl feels relieved by Majin's skepticism. Maybe now he won't have to take the job after all. But Majin's remark angers Shurna and Lucy, who both already gave Beryl their full endorsement. Despite their support, Majin remains unconvinced. With all due respect, Majin explains, he's only concerned about protecting the new adventurers. There have been unsettling reports about unusual monster activity lately. Nidus gets the point Majin is trying to make, so he asks what Beryl would have to do to gain his approval. Majin replies that if Beryl can defeat the black rank Shurna in a duel, then he'll have proven himself as a capable teacher. It sounds straightforward enough, and since Shurna agrees to it, much to Beryl's dismay, Nidus says he'll arrange the duel immediately. Before long, Beryl and Shurna are both on on the training grounds, and a huge crowd has already gathered around them. They are all eager to see who the legendary Shurna is going to be fighting, and Shurna is equally excited to get to fight her master again. When Shurna was just a child, she traveled with her parents as part of a merchant caravan. During their journey, however, a monstrous beast ambushed them, ripping one of the carriages apart. In a last act of love, Shurna's parents hurled her over the edge of a nearby cliff to save her life. Because of that, she alone survived the tragedy. Later, when she regained consciousness, the first person she saw was Beryl looking down at her. He took her back to his house to treat her wounds, and once she was feeling a little better, he started asking her a few questions. He got her to tell him that her name was Shurna, but when he asked about her parents, she started having a panic attack. So Beryl told her to just rest up some more until she felt better, because Shurna had no place else to go. Beryl asked his parents if they'd be willing to let her stay with them, at least until they could find her a new home, and they agreed. So from that moment on, Shurna became practically part of the family. Initially, she kept her distance, reluctant to trust them, until one morning when she spotted Beryl practicing with his sword. Sensing her curiosity, Beryl invited her to train alongside him. From that moment on, Shurna seized every opportunity to learn from him as he guided her through the fundamentals of swordsmanship. Their connection deepened, forging a strong bond between them. As a result, Shurna became more outgoing, and one morning as Beryl was getting ready to begin his classes at his dojo, he saw Shurna waiting outside with her sword in hand, so he invited her to join in. Shurna devoted herself completely to sword training, and part of her wished she could remain with Beryl's family permanently. However, when a kind family offered to take her in, Beryl and his parents persuaded her that this would be the better path for her future. Though her heart resisted leaving, she couldn't bear the thought of becoming a burden to Beryl. With deep gratitude for all he'd done, she bid him farewell. A few years after that, Shurna had already become a gold rank adventurer, and she was out on an escort mission when the caravan was suddenly attacked by a group of bandits. The leader of the bandits was known to be a dangerously skilled swordsman, so her teammate warned her to be careful. But before he knew it, Shurna had already jumped into the air to attack the bandits, and before long, they were all unconscious on the ground. Shurna became an adventurer for two important reasons. First, she wants to stop as many tragedies as she can to spare others from suffering like she once did. Second, she's determined to make full use of everything Beryl taught her, putting those hard-earned skills to meaningful work. So now that she has the chance to face Beryl again after 20 years, she plans to show him just how much she has improved since he last saw her. Beryl isn't exactly thrilled about this duel, but he can see how excited Shurna is. So as her master, it is his duty to give her a good fight. As the duel kicks off, Shurna rushes in and unleashes a relentless flurry of sword strikes at Beryl. Her speed is incredible, but Beryl manages to keep up with every move she makes, leaving her unable to land even a single blow. Shurna is overjoyed by how this fight is turning out, because it has been so long since she was able to fight someone at full strength without needing to worry about hurting them. And Beryl is pleased to see that Shurna has grown so much in strength since the last time he saw her. He can tell that she has been diligently training non-stop to get to her current skill level. However, she isn't quite perfect yet, as he has noticed a weakness in her fighting technique. The strikes from her left hand are somewhat rigid, allowing Beryl to slide his sword through the handle of hers and knock it from her grasp. Shurna attempts to retaliate with her remaining sword, but Beryl swiftly sweeps her legs out from under her and presses his blade to her throat as she lies on the ground. With this, Beryl has officially won the duel, so the others come down to congratulate him on his victory, and Majin sincerely apologizes for doubting Beryl's skill. Beryl tells him there's no need to apologize since it's normal to be skeptical of a teacher whom you have never seen before. But now that he's content with Beryl's abilities, there's no longer anything standing in the way of Beryl becoming a special instructor at this place. The next day, Beryl meets with the adventure students in front of a dungeon, and their names are Porta, Nidri, and Sarlacats. As they step into the dungeon, Sarlacats's magic watch warns him that there are 6 monsters up ahead, so everyone gets ready for battle. Beryl and Shurna are only here to ensure nothing goes wrong, so they relax and allow the kids to take care of the fighting. And as soon as the young ones engage the first group of goblins, they manage to take them down in no time at all. The group keeps pressing onward, and before too long, they've managed to clear the dungeon without running getting into any serious trouble, so they all make their way back toward the entrance. Upon their return to town, the training will officially be over. However, Beryl thinks it's odd that the dungeon had so few monsters. Right at that moment, just as Porta is stepping out of the dungeon, Sarlacat's magic watch senses something so immensely powerful that it cracks apart. Beryl shouts at Porta to stop, but the warning comes too late. He got attacked. Porta remains alive, though he's severely injured and requires urgent medical care. Unfortunately, Beryl and Shurna can't assist him until they defeat the monster, and that won't be a simple job. This creature is a specially designated threat known as Xenograble, and it's so powerful that even top-tier adventurers wouldn't be able to take it down. Still, the two of them have no option but to face it in battle. Beryl regrets coming on this mission, but at least Shurna was by his side, and given that she's a black rank adventurer, she should have no trouble dealing with the monster. While she handles that, Beryl intends to go assist Porta, but just as he reaches out to ask for a healing potion, Shurna grabs him and declares that she'll be the one to help Porta instead. Before Beryl can even react, the griffin lunges at him suddenly. He barely manages to roll away, and now he's left with no option but to fight. As the beast swipes at him with its claws, Beryl deftly blocks each strike with his sword. Spotting an opening, he immediately aims for the griffin's legs, but the scales covering them are as tough as stone, making his slash completely ineffective. For now, he's forced to stay on the defensive, doing everything he can to hold out long enough for Shurna to get Porta to safety. While he was tending to Shurna, he momentarily lowered his guard, nearly paying with his life. Fortunately, he managed to block the attack just in time, though he still suffered a severe cut, so he must now find a way to defeat this creature before it overcomes him. In such scenarios, Beryl typically concentrates his strikes on the monster's head. However, since it can spew fire, a direct frontal approach will never allow him to get near enough. Instead, Beryl opts to strike from the side, but the griffin notices him and retaliates with a swift tail swipe. Even so, Beryl manages to recover and slices the griffin's tail off with a single swing. This infuriates the griffin, and it to unleash a huge fireball at Beryl, who is forced to leap back. He had anticipated that cutting off its tail would anger it, but he didn't foresee the griffin charging directly at him. It slams its head into Beryl's body. Though the impact certainly hurt, Beryl remains alright, so he adjusts his position and wait out the griffin's outburst. However, that's easier said than done, because as Beryl desperately clings to its back, the griffin suddenly takes flight, soaring straight to the sky. A fall from such a height would be deadly for Beryl, so he clings on with all his strength. This only infuriates the griffin further. It finally descends back to the ground, allowing Beryl to leap off its back. But now, the griffin is no longer holding anything back. It casts a spell to heat the surrounding ground, transforming it into lava, forcing Beryl to stand on a rock to escape being burned alive. But Beryl isn't the only one at risk of burning, as the lava is rapidly flooding into the cave, and it's only a matter of time before the boys inside succumb to the intense heat. Hearing their desperate cries for help, Beryl can no longer focus on his own safety, so he begins sprinting across the lava to confront the griffin, his boots protecting him for the moment. Yet, as he engages the griffin in combat, he still finds himself unable to make headway against its tough, unyielding body. The griffin starts launching more fireballs at him, so now Beryl has to run and dodge his way across the lava. One of the fireball explosions ends up launching Beryl into the air, but he takes advantage of it and drives his sword into the griffin's eye. The beast lets out a scream of agony and flings Beryl away. The good news is that Beryl's sword is still lodged in its eye, meaning it can't see anymore. But the bad news is that Beryl no longer has a weapon to fight or block with, and the griffin, furious and in agony, looks ready to unleash absolute devastation upon him. Suddenly, something distracts the griffin, making it glance upward, and there's Shurna, leaping from the cliff's edge with her blades drawn, ready to deliver the final blow. She crashes into the beast at full force, slamming it to the ground. Before it can even react, she swings her blade across its neck, ending the griffin's life for good. Spotting Beryl's shattered sword still embedded in the griffin's eye, Shurna apologizes. If she had arrived earlier to assist him, this wouldn't have happened. But Beryl reassures her it's nothing to dwell on right now. His biggest concern is the trainees. Just as he says this, the children begin emerging from the cave, and against all odds, they've escaped without serious burns. In the end, despite everything, it all turned out alright. The group returns to the Adventurers Guild to inform the guild master of the events, and he is astonished to learn that Beryl and Shurna triumphed over a named monster. Shurna explains that without Beryl's generous decision to join them on the mission, she would have surely perished against the creature. Beryl attempts to point out that Shurna delivered the killing blow, but she brushes off any desire to claim credit for the feat. The guild master commends Beryl for his outstanding work and vows to reward him for it. In the meantime, he inquires if Beryl would consider becoming an adventurer, but Beryl promptly dismisses the suggestion. Afterward, he and Shurna step outside, and Shurna apologizes again, admitting that he only got entangled in this ordeal because she had been boasting about his strength to everyone. Beryl assures her that he doesn't mind, though he still feels unworthy of all the praise he's been receiving. Nevertheless, Shurna insists that he was truly formidable and expresses her gratitude for the opportunity to fight beside him in a life-or-death battle. Beryl, in turn, thanks her, noting that Shurna's impeccable decisions were crucial in ensuring they all returned alive. Shurna is delighted to receive Beryl's praise, but feels she doesn't deserve it. Yet Beryl insists that she has fully earned his admiration, as she has matured into an exceptional adventurer. The following morning, Beryl wakes up early. His broken sword needs fixing, but he's still unfamiliar with the capital. That's why he asks Kiruni to lead him to a blacksmith shop. He thanks her for helping him out with such little notice, but she was already planning to visit a blacksmith today anyway, so it's really no bother. Alusha also chose to come along, but certainly not out of jealousy. She claims her presence is due to the importance of selecting a sword, and she wants to assist Beryl in making the best possible decision. In reality, though, she's missed every prior chance to go on a date with Beryl, so she's determined not to let this opportunity pass her by as well. When they reach the blacksmith's shop, the owner steps out to welcome Kiruni, but the moment he spots Beryl, his expression changed. Of all people, he never expected to see his old master here. Years ago, Balder had been one of Beryl's students, in fact, the oldest he'd ever trained at the time. Back then, Balder had joined the dojo believing that mastering the sword would make him a better blacksmith someday. Yet despite his initial motive, he never treated Beryl's lessons lightly, and now, judging by the forge behind him, it seems he'd truly accomplished his dream. With everyone present, Balder inquires how he can assist them. Kiruni steps forward first, stating that her short sword needs sharpening. Balder gladly agrees to help and asks her to present the sword. Kiruni hands it over, and Balder examines it closely for several moments, but then he drops it and informs her that there's nothing he can do, as she has completely ruined the sword. Alusha finds it odd that Kiruni ruined her sword, given how precise she typically is during practice, but if that's the case, there's only one explanation for the sword's condition. Beryl turns to Kiruni and asks how it feels when she holds the short sword. After reflecting for a moment, she replies that the sword feels light. Upon hearing this, Beryl and Balder immediately understand the issue. They explain to her that she's not suited for the short sword, as failing to sense the weapon's weight means she won't be able to wield it effectively. That's settled. They now need to find a new sword for her. Beryl suggests a two-handed greatsword might suit her well. While Kiruni is small, she's also incredibly strong, so the weight shouldn't be an issue. He hands her one to test, and though it's noticeably heavier than what she's accustomed to, it's still manageable enough for combat. After a few experimental swings, she makes up her mind. She'll buy it. After all, Beryl recommended it, and she can't deny how impressive it looks strapped to her back. With Kiruni's shopping concluded, Beryl begins browsing Balder's collection for a new sword for himself. However, Alusha insists that a swordsman of his skill deserves a custom-made sword. Beryl feels that going to such lengths isn't necessary, as the swords available here should be perfectly adequate. While he's still examining the options, Shurna enters carrying a large sack. The moment Alusha and Shurna lock eyes, they start bickering, unable to tolerate each other. But Beryl shifts the conversation, asking Shurna what brings her here. Shurna mentions that the reason she's here is because she has a particular task for Balder. She tosses her sack onto the front desk and opens it to show the griffin's leg, the one she and Beryl took down. She then informs Balder that what she wants is for him to craft a long sword from this material. Balder is astonished. This is the first request he's ever forgotten to forge a long sword from the remains of a named monster. Still, he can't help but question why Shurna would need a long sword in the first place, given her reputation for wielding twin blades. She explains that she actually wants to give the sword to Beryl, but Beryl doesn't think he deserves such a fancy sword. He reminds Shurna she was the one who dealt the killing blow, so she deserves to keep the monster leg for herself. But she insists on gifting him a sword since it's the only way she can make up for the sword Beryl lost. Balder suddenly interjects, urging Beryl to accept the gift already, though not because he's siding with Shurna. He's eager to take on the challenge of crafting an impressive sword from the named monster's leg. Beryl reluctantly agrees to have a sword forged from the monster's leg, but he can tell from the expression on Balder's face that he's planning something extravagant. Beryl warns Balder that he only wants a standard sword, and Balder assures him he won't create anything strange. Still, for some reason, Beryl remains skeptical of his promise. Balder explains that, in any case, crafting his masterpiece will take some time. He requests a week to finish the job, and Beryl agrees without any issue. With their business now settled, he mentions that it's time for them to go. Just as he says this, Kearney approaches Beryl with a small request. She's just acquired a new sword and needs to learn how to wield it correctly, so she asks Beryl if she'd be willing to give her some one-on-one training. Beryl explains to her that a great sword primarily serves two key functions. First, it allows you to deliver powerful, heavy strikes. Swinging sideways is ideal to maximize your momentum. Second, gripping the blade at the ricasso gives you better control and makes the weapon easier to handle. Kearney tests it out, and the motion stirs up old memories. Back when she trained at Beryl's dojo, she spent countless hours perfecting her sword swings. That evening, after a long day of work, Beryl visits a tavern to enjoy a good cup of wine, but it's already late, so he places a few coins on the table and departs. As Beryl walks home alone, he spots a child approaching him. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't give it a second thought, but as they pass each other, she attempts to slip her hand into Beryl's jacket to steal his money. Beryl catches her in the act and grabs her arm, preventing her escape. Suddenly, without warning, she unleashes a burst of fire magic at Beryl to catch him off guard. The distraction works. Beryl has no choice but to release her as he shields himself from the flames. Seizing the moment, she dashes away into the darkness, finally slipping into a building where several men are gambling. As she passes by them, she hands over the entire sum of money she managed to steal earlier that night. The men, dissatisfied with the amount, accuse her of slacking off, but their boss intervenes, silencing them, and he insists that Mui would never deliberately do such a thing. After all, she's well aware of the consequences of defying him. Mui's face stays blank, but she knows the boss's cruelty all too well, so she cannot afford to keep making errors. Suddenly, she realizes she made a terrible mistake. In her rush to escape Beryl, she accidentally dropped her ring somewhere, and to her horror, Beryl has just discovered it. The following day at the training hall, Kearney continues honing her skills with the new greatsword, while on the other side, Hemblitz is engaged in a sparring match with Beryl. Despite his efforts, he hasn't been able to land a single blow yet. As he rushes in for one final attempt, he feints an overhead strike and instead aims for Beryl's midsection. Beryl finds the move impressive, but still manages to counter it with ease, securing another win. Hemblitz expresses his gratitude for the lesson, and Beryl commends him on how much he's improved in such a short time. The maneuver was nearly flawless, but still not quite enough to beat Beryl's sharp reflexes. Just then, Hemblitz glances over at Kearney and remarks that switching weapons so suddenly takes real courage. Yet she demonstrates great potential, and boosting the Knight's Order's combat strength is crucial if they're going to take on the gang of thieves known as the Dark Hand of Twilight. Recently, the Twilight Thieves have started causing chaos in the capital, stirring up a lot of trouble. Because of this, both the Royal Guard and the Knight's Order are conducting investigations. Once they pinpoint the Twilight hideout's location, they intend to storm the place and capture every last thief. But to ensure success, they'll need every capable fighter available. And as it happens, Kearney packs quite a punch. Certainly, Hemblitz is confident that Beryl could easily defeat the Twilight Thieves on his own, but he prefers not to trouble him with such tedious tasks. Instead, he informs Beryl that he can leave all the combat to the Knights of the Knight's Order. In any case, Beryl has no desire to engage in battle. He has never confronted any criminals in the past, and he has no intention of beginning now. Yet, he recalls the ring he took from that pickpocket pickpocket the previous day and considers whether it could aid the investigation. But the moment Kearney notices the ring in his hand, she assumes Beryl intends to present it to someone as a gift, and Hemblitz concurs with her. Beryl attempts to clarify that the ring isn't meant as a gift, but before he can speak, Kearney suggests that if he's planning to propose to Alusha, he might need a larger ring, as this one wouldn't fit her. Beryl has no clue where she got the impression that he's planning to propose to someone, but at last, he finds an opening to speak and clarifies that he was actually targeted by a pickpocket just the day before. He caught her hand before she could take anything, but she still slipped away, because when she hit him with fire magic, it caught him completely off guard. Kearney finds the situation odd, reasoning that if the girl possesses magical abilities, she wouldn't resort to pickpocketing. Magic is a scarce skill, and those who have it can enroll in the Magic Institute at no cost, with all living expenses covered. Hemblitz proposes that the girl might have used a magical accessory to conjure the fire, but either way, he turns to Beryl and asks what he intends to do with the ring. Beryl makes it clear he has no intention of keeping it. Considering the ring was probably stolen in the first place, he'd rather see it returned to whoever truly owns it. Hearing this, Hemblitz suggests he could simply leave the ring at the Knight's Order's front desk, and that's precisely what Beryl ends up doing. Now that the ring has been dealt with, Beryl has no intention of getting any more involved in the matter. The pickpocket didn't actually steal anything from him, and he sees no reason to go looking for her. Still, something about the way she looked at him when he caught her continues to bother him. As Beryl makes his way through town, he figures it's time to check out the housing market. After all, he can't stay at an inn indefinitely, but the moment he sees the prices, it's enough to make his heart skip a beat. Sure, his salary from the Knight's Order technically covers it, but that's still an enormous amount of money to part with. At that moment, he spots a girl behind him who appears to be searching for something. He approaches to offer his assistance. However, upon closer inspection, he recognizes her as the girl who attempted to rob him the previous night. He asks if she's searching for a ring, and upon hearing him mention it, the girl lashes out, believing he stole it. However, Beryl urges her to calm down. As he wishes to avoid making a scene, he explains that he left the ring at the front desk of the Knight's Order, so it's no longer in his possession. Of course, the girl can't simply stroll into the Knight's Order to retrieve it. Next, Beryl questions whether she actually stole the ring, pointing out how strange it is that she'd work so hard to retrieve it if it meant nothing to her. She insists she didn't steal it, and for Beryl, that's answer enough. He tells her to come along so they can recover it together. Mui hesitates at first, but Beryl warns her that proving ownership will be difficult if she goes alone. Though, with his support, getting it back should be quick. Reluctantly, Mui agrees to follow him, though she makes no effort to hide her displeasure about the situation. Upon reaching the Knight's Order base, Beryl retrieves the ring, but before handing it over to Mui, he mentions that he'd like to have a brief conversation with her. At that moment, Alusha appears, and seeing Beryl in a heated discussion with Mui, her initial thought is that Mui must be his secret love child he's never mentioned, but Beryl quickly refutes this. The group go inside so Beryl can clarify the entire situation to Alusha. Now that she's aware of what's happening, Alusha asks Beryl what he plans to do about Mui. Typically, as a knight, arresting Mui for pickpocketing would fall under Alusha's responsibility. However, Beryl isn't keen on getting her into trouble. He questions Mui, asking if she'll quit pickpocketing if he releases her, but instead of answering, she just demands that he return the ring to her. It's clear she has no intention of stopping, but the fact that she didn't lie about it shows Beryl that deep down, she's an honest kid. Alusha remembers hearing that Mui used magic against Beryl, so she asks whether it was done with a magical accessory, or if it came naturally. Mui admits she did it herself. Hearing this, Alusha explains that if she has a natural gift for magic, the kingdom will provide for all her needs, meaning she won't have to depend on pickpocketing just to get by. Mui begins to open up a bit, revealing that she can't stop because she needs to gather $5 million. She shares that her boss promised to use magic to resurrect her sister if she paid him that sum. However, she lacks the time to earn such an amount through legal means, which is why she resorted to crime. Right away, Beryl understands Mui's boss must be deceiving her. Resurrecting the dead simply isn't possible, but he knows telling her that directly wouldn't work. There's no chance she'd believe him in this moment. At that moment, Alusha steps out to investigate something she needs to confirm. Meanwhile, Beryl and Mui Mui are left alone. Beryl offers her some snacks, and though Mui refuses, her obvious hunger convinces him it's a good idea. He steps away briefly and returns with a loaf of bread for Mui. The moment he gives it to her, Mui eagerly begins eating. Beryl feels relieved to have encountered her today, as he's been concerned about Mui since noticing the sorrowful expression on her face the day before. Being able to assist her, even in a small way, brings him joy. Having kept her here long enough, Beryl finally returns Mui's ring to her. Now that she has the ring, Mui announces she's leaving. But before she can step out the door, Lucy bursts in. Alusha had informed her about Mui's magical potential, and as head of the magical corps, Lucy introduces herself and extends an invitation to join the Magical Institute, emphasizing that magic users are always welcomed there. However, Mui refuses the offer outright, insisting she could never make 5 million dalk at the Institute. Lucy inquires about Mui's plans for all the money she's collecting. Mui shares that she intends to pay a wizard to bring her deceased sister back to life. Upon hearing this, Lucy immediately informs her that she's being deceived, as resurrection magic isn't real. Nevertheless, Mui remains adamant that her sister can be revived, claiming she witnessed it herself, or at least that's what she thinks, because in her flashback, all the supposed wizard actually does is cause her sister's corpse to twitch slightly. Overwhelmed by grief, Mui instantly believed he could truly resurrect her sister. But the wizard had claimed it would take 5 million dalk to fully bring Mui's sister back to life, which is why she turned to pickpocketing to scrape together the money. Lucy can't help but pity Mui for falling victim to such a cruel scam, but she gently explains that resurrection magic simply doesn't exist. Mui fires back, accusing Lucy of lying, but Lucy counters by reminding her that she's a highly regarded mage with years of study under her belt. If revival magic were real, she argues, someone of her standing would have known about it long before some shady, self-proclaimed wizard ever could. At this stage, Mui is beginning to suspect she might have been deceived. Lucy then asks for the name of the wizard who initiated this scheme. Mui questions why she needs to know. Lucy clarifies that she intends to confront him and determine whether he's lying about resurrection magic. If by some chance he's telling the truth, Lucy vows to personally cover the 5 million dalk to bring Mui's sister back. But if the man is lying, it means he has disrespected the soul of Mui's sister, and Lucy won't let that go unaddressed. Mui informs her that the man's name is Twilight, and that's the name of the leader of the Twilight Thieves. So Lucy asks Mui to lead her to him immediately. Alusha says she wants to come along as well, but having a night around would draw too much attention, so instead she asks Beryl to come with her. Short after, they reach the entrance to Twilight's hideout, and Beryl can't help but be taken aback. He hadn't expected a thieves' hideout to be sitting so boldly along the main road. A part of him now regrets not borrowing a proper sword for this confrontation, but Lucy quickly reassures him. Given his skill, a wooden sword ought to be plenty against a handful of bandits. With no reason to delay any longer, Lucy blasts the front door open in an instant, and right away they find themselves face to face with a gang of thieves. One of the thieves attempts to seize Lucy, but she has no patience for petty bandits like him. She blasts the thief back and instructs Beryl to take care of the others while she goes to confront Twilight. The thieves notice Mui standing behind Beryl and realize she's the one who betrayed them. One of them lunges at her, but Beryl quickly jabs him in the throat. Armed only with a wooden sword, the bandits are likely to survive. Still, a strike to the throat with a wooden sword is intensely painful, causing them to waver. As Beryl handles the situation upstairs, Lucy descends to the basement to face Twilight. The moment he spots her, he employs a magic accessory to hurl ice balls at Lucy, but as a master mage, Lucy is unfazed by such attacks. She effortlessly melts through the ice, only to find that Twilight has more magic accessories at his disposal. He then uses telekinesis magic to lift Lucy off the ground, and she realizes this must be the trick he used to deceive Mui. Twilight confesses he never used necromancy at all. Instead, he simply manipulated her sister's corpse with telekinesis to sell the lie. Even now, he can't help but laugh at how easily Mui fell for his act. truly believing he could bring the dead back to life. As he gathers a fireball in his hands, aiming to take Lucy down, her patience snaps. She summons a gust of wind directly in front of Twilight, slamming him unconscious with a single blast of pressure. Upstairs, Beryl has just wrapped up dealing with the majority of the bandits, but one stubborn thug staggers back to his feet. He starts hurling insults at Mui, calling her an ungrateful after all Twilight supposedly did for her. That's the last straw for Beryl. He jabs the guy straight in the throat again, sending him crashing back to the ground. A short later, Lucy emerges from the basement with Twilight in tow, commanding him to reveal the truth to Mui unless he wants to face another wind blast. Reluctantly, Twilight confesses to Mui that he lied about resurrection magic, leaving her heartbroken as she realizes she won't ever see her sister again. With all the bandits subdued, Lucy announces she'll contact the Knight's order to have Twilight and his crew arrested. Later, the bandits are loaded onto a wagon, ready to be transported to prison. Alusha expresses her gratitude to Beryl and Lucy for their assistance. However, there's still much investigation ahead, as the magic accessories Twilight used were far too strong for someone of his caliber to have obtained on his own. This confirms someone else must be controlling Twilight from behind the scenes, and now they have to uncover who's really in charge. As Twilight and his gang are in their way to jail, a shadowy figure observes from the darkness. Without warning, the stranger raises a hand toward the wagon, and Twilight's body suddenly begins burning with an eerie inner light just before he collapses, dying in agony. Later, the mysterious man delivers his report to their superior, confirming that Twilight has been permanently silenced, all thanks to the enchanted device they had secretly placed inside him. That way, there's no chance of their plans being exposed. The bishop is pleased to hear this, as he plans to use the corpses that Twilight collected for him to recreate God's miracle with his own hands. The day after Beryl finishes training the knights, Alusha comes up to him because there's something she needs to share. She explains to Beryl that during Twilight's transport yesterday, he unexpectedly exploded without warning, with only a magic device remaining. Right now, the Magic Corps is looking into where the magic device came from, but so far, they haven't discovered anything. Beryl inquires about the missing corpses that were under Twilight's watch, and Alusha tells him she already questioned some of Twilight's subordinates, but none of them appeared to have any information about what happened to the bodies. All of this suggests that Twilight was following someone else's orders, and they have to uncover who that is as quickly as possible. Later that same day, Beryl makes his way back to the blacksmith's shop to collect his newly forged sword, and he's genuinely pleased with how well it came out. He's eager to test it out once he and Kirini return to the training hall. However, as he gets closer, he notices Lucy standing outside waiting for him, and judging by her expression, she's there for something serious. She informs him that she has an urgent matter to discuss and invites him to her house for a conversation. Moments later, they reach Lucy's residence, and Beryl is astonished, unaware that she resided in such a huge mansion. While there, he inquires about Mui's well-being, and Lucy shares that she's still working to convince her to pursue magic studies. They both enter the house, and after preparing a cup of tea for herself, Lucy chooses to present Beryl to the man seated opposite him. He is Ibroy Hallman, a priest from the Sphene Church. Beryl is pleased to make his acquaintance, yet he remains puzzled about the presence of a church representative. Lucy reveals that all the magical devices in Twilight's possession were originally crafted by the nation of Sphene, but they were secretly supplied to a criminal like Twilight through a bishop named Revios Sarlian. In exchange for these magic devices, Bishop Revios demanded that Twilight gather corpses for him. This, she explains, is precisely why Twilight was ultimately silenced using one of those very same magical devices. Yet Beryl remains confused about why Revios would seek dead bodies to begin with. Ibroy explains that within the Sphene Church, magic is regarded as a divine miracle. Among the many miracles possible, one is considered the most challenging, bringing the dead back to life. Naturally, Ibroy doubts the possibility of such a resurrection. However, he suspects Revios is likely experimenting with it, which explains his acquisition of those corpses. If Ibroy is aware of all this, Beryl questions why he hasn't taken action to halt Revios yet. Unfortunately, things aren't that straightforward. Revios is currently staying at the Sphene Church in the town's northern district, and the Knight's Order intends to summon him for questioning tomorrow. Ideally, he'll cooperate, but there's also a risk he might try to flee toward the border. If Revios successfully makes it back to Sphene's territory, the Knight's Order would lose all authority to pursue him. That's exactly why they were hoping Beryl could assist. They need someone to intercept Revios in case he attempts to escape. Under normal circumstances, either the Knight's Order or Magic Corps would have no trouble detaining him. However, using force against a Sphene bishop risks sparking an international dispute. Even Ibroy can't intervene directly. He lacks the authority to challenge a bishop's status. Beryl presents the ideal solution. His combat skills make him capable of overpowering Revios, while his unofficial standing means the kingdom faces no political repercussions from his actions. Lucy has briefed Alucia on the plan, granting Beryl full authorization to use any means necessary to prevent Revios from escaping. But that's only the case if he chooses to run. If the accusations against him turn out to be true, then Lucy wants to make sure Revios faces consequences for what he's attempting to do. Beryl, meanwhile, isn't particularly concerned about a bishop trying to resurrect the dead. However, there's a possibility he might be able to retrieve Mui's sister's body for her. Mui's sister won't be coming back, but if Mui had the opportunity to properly grieve, then maybe she'd be able to move forward. So, in the end, Beryl decides to accept Lucy's offer. Lucy expresses her gratitude and assures Beryl that she'll compensate him fairly for his help. Just as Beryl opens the front door to head out, he nearly bumps into Mui, who has just returned from shopping. Surprised to see him, Mui asks what brings him here today. Beryl explains that he just stopped by for a brief conversation with Lucy, but he adds that he's glad their paths crossed. Seeing her again makes him happy, especially knowing she's doing well. Mui still struggles to grasp why Beryl and Lucy have gone to such lengths to help her. She was a thief who attempted to rob Beryl, yet they rescued her from Twilight, and now they're providing her a home and looking after her. She can't understand why they care so deeply for her. Beryl understands that she must be confused by the sudden change of her life, but he assures her there's no need to worry. None of the adults here will ever betray or exploit her as Twilight did, so she can simply unwind and embrace her youth moving forward. Mui wonders whether it's truly alright for her to have a happy life, and Beryl reassures her, saying she has a future full of brightness and promise. He reaches out to pat her head, but Mui swats his hand away, not fond of being treated like a little kid. Seeing this, Beryl chooses to give her space for the time being, confident that she'll grow more comfortable with everyone around her eventually. A short while later, he steps out of Lucy's house. Later that night, Beryl moves stealthily around the Northern District Church, keeping an eye out for any suspicious activity from Revios. Just as he suspected, he discovers Revios and his men packing up their belongings, preparing to escape the country. Hoping to intercept them, Beryl attempts to slip around the back, but a cloaked man suddenly blocks his path. The man identifies Beryl as the one who defeated all of Twilight's followers and reveals that he had already predicted Beryl would be sent to stop them. Beryl realizes this approach is unlikely to succeed, but he still has to notify them that Revios is scheduled for questioning tomorrow and therefore isn't permitted to leave the country. As expected, the man pays no attention to the order and summons 3 swordsmen to deal with Beryl. He even allows them to use magic against him. The 3 swordsmen touch the tips of their blades together and recite a spell that enhances both their strength and speed, now moving much faster than before. They're going to be difficult for Beryl to keep up with. Meanwhile, with Beryl distracted by the 3 swordsmen, Revios and Spur retreat into the church to gather the last of their belongings for their escape. It's been some time since Beryl last fought with lethal intent, but he knows holding back now would mean certain death. As the first attacker lunges at him, Beryl sidesteps with precision and delivers a deep slash across the man's chest. Seeing this, the remaining 2 recognize the threat Beryl poses and coordinate their assault, pressing him simultaneously to buy time as backup arrives. Now, Beryl is surrounded by 5 attackers, and even for him, this is a bit too much to handle alone. Luckily, he isn't alone, and just as one of the swordsmen is about to slash Beryl, a wind spell knocks his blade out of his hand. Faisal then runs up and tells Beryl she is here to help him, and Kiruni is here too. Beryl is confused confused about their presence. After all, the entire plan was designed to keep the Knight's Order and Magic Corps from direct involvement. The two clarify that they aren't acting under any official command. They simply happened to be nearby and chose to lend Beryl a hand, nothing more. Though Beryl isn't entirely convinced that's how things should go, he's still relieved to have backup. With that, the three of them start cutting through their enemies together. At one point, Beryl clashes with one of the swordsmen, and a few moments later, the blue glow on his body fades. The swordsman freezes up and falls over when this happens, so Beryl takes the opportunity to knock him out, even though he doesn't understand what just happened. Faisal clarifies that the swordsman's enhancement spells are likely fading, leaving them vulnerable to the resulting backlash, which should make them easier to beat. However, more reinforcements are approaching, so Faisal and Kearney assure Beryl they can manage the situation here and urge him to pursue Revios. Beryl expresses gratitude for their assistance and hurries into the church to track down Revios. Yet, before he can reach him, Spur steps forward as Revios starts chanting a spell. He informs Beryl that he will be the first to behold the miracle of life that Revios has devoted his existence to studying. As soon as the spell is finished, the nearby coffins start to tremble. Moments later, the bodies within begin to move. It appears Revios has achieved some success in his resurrection magic research, or at least partial success, as these individuals are essentially just zombies. Beryl notices Mui's sister among the zombies, and it makes him recall how desperately Mui wished for her sister to be brought back. Yet, he's also aware that Mui wouldn't want to see her sister like this. That leaves him with a difficult decision. He realizes he has no choice but to destroy the corpses. When one of the zombies suddenly grabs his leg, Beryl swiftly decapitates it. Instantly, the zombie erupts in blue flames. Seeing this, Beryl repeats the same action with the others until the only remaining is Mui's sister. He had hoped to let Mui grieve by bringing her sister's body back, but now it's clear that won't happen. With an apology, he swings at her neck. Mui's sister bursts into blue flames, vanishing completely. Only a ring remains, but Beryl's problems aren't done yet. As Spur returns, determined to end him, he lunges at Beryl with full force. Beryl blocks the first strike, but Spur turns out to be far more skilled than expected. Quickly outmaneuvering him, he managed to stab Beryl in the shoulder, but Beryl isn't about to accept defeat. He regains his composure and charges straight at Spur. As Spur attempts to strike him, Beryl dodges just in time and counters with a slash across Spur's shoulder. Spur never would have guessed that someone as old as Beryl could still match his speed even after using a magic boost, but he's got one last trick left, so he pulls out a dagger and drives it into his own arm to grant himself an additional surge of power. Spur rushes at Beryl again, and now Beryl struggles to defend himself. Spur's strikes come so quickly that Beryl ends up with small wounds scattered across his body. It's obvious that Spur is one of the most formidable foes Beryl has ever fought, but that doesn't mean Beryl plans to back down. If he can't match Spur in speed, then he'll simply have to outsmart him with strategy. As Spur drives his sword toward Beryl once more, Beryl leans into the attack, using his shoulder to parry the blow. Yes, Beryl takes a severe injury to his shoulder, but this creates the perfect opportunity for him to slip past Spur's defense and deliver a deep slash across his chest. That strike should have been enough to finish him, yet somehow, Spur remains on his feet. Even as the backlash from his buffs kicks in, he continues to advance toward Beryl, blood pouring from every wound covering his body. Beryl tells him to stand down, insisting that he's already lost the fight, but as long as Spur is still breathing, he refuses to stop battling. Beryl is both impressed and disturbed by Spur's tenacity, but it isn't long before the toll of his wounds finally overtakes him, and he collapses to the ground, dead. Now that it's all over, Beryl steps outside and sees that Kearney and Faisal have successfully apprehended Revios. He thanks them for handling things so well. Beryl then faces Revios, but there's not a trace of regret on the man's face. Even upon hearing of Spur's defeat, Revios merely remarks that Spur would have willingly given his life for their mission, and even though they've captured him, it means nothing. Without the creation of a miracle by blood, the world is already lost. Beryl has no clue what Revios means, but he dismisses it as he ravings of a madman. The following morning, he meets up with Lucy to fill her in on everything that went down. He's deeply disappointed because he wasn't able to recover Mui's sister's body intact. Noticing his distress, Lucy tells him to come with her so she can give him that reward she'd promised. She guides him to a house in the town and reveals that this is his reward. Beryl is a little taken aback. He's actually been searching for a house lately, so this couldn't have come at a better time. Lucy encourages him to head inside and check it out, and to his surprise, Beryl sees Mui cleaning the house. Curious, he asks what she's doing there. The night before, Lucy and Mui had a long conversation, and Mui made up her mind. She wants to assist to the Magic Academy. In that case, she'll need a guardian. So from this day forward, she'll be living with Beryl. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.